suspected object in the sky no matter what, or he may have wanted to fly so he could get closer to the UFO world and maybe see something for himself. The former is more likely, but you never know.
Well, his dream is that he wanted to fly in the Australian version of the Air Force. Like, he really wanted to be a soldier, and he wanted to fly up there, and he wanted to shoot all the Nazis. Which is like, it's far from that, because it's 1978. So I don't know why he thought now was the time of joining World War II, even though it's like 30 years old.
Were the Australians involved in Vietnam at all?
They watched it.
Okay.
But either way, Fred Valentish's dreams of becoming a well-respected pilot were unfortunately not in the cards, because despite his lofty ambitions, evidence shows that Fred just wasn't very good at piloting aircraft.
I didn't know you could fail all of these tests so much and so often and still be allowed to rent a plane and fly in the sky. Of course, it's a relaxed fit, so it's like, oh, this will be interesting. I listened to the Coast to Coast episode. There's an old In Search Of by Leonard Nimoy and his mustache phase. He looks very dashing in it. And I was like, oh, that'll be it. And then, of course, what do I find? A 315-page PDF of the collection, essentially the Australian version of a FOIA request into this case. And what it reveals is how often he failed these tests and how often he sort of... I love Fred. I'm not blaming Fred. We might need to blame Fred. But he said to people, it's sort of like a white lie about how he did pass all of these tests.
But he didn't?
No. And people kept asking his mentor, like his pilot mentor, who might have been half-bird, he'd asked him, like, how'd those tests go? And Fred's like, right. Oh, they went right. I got A. You know what I mean? Like you got an AF. You know what I mean? Like, you got on the F.
Well, in his late teens, Fred was rejected from the Royal Australian Air Force because he didn't meet the qualifications. So he went into the RAAF training corps and had logged 150 hours of flight time by the time of his disappearance. The problem was, during those 150 hours, he'd actually been involved in a disturbing amount of potentially disastrous incidents. One time...
He's a bit of a Mr. Magoo.
All right. Well, maybe he should be flying a plane.
No. One time, he strayed into a controlled zone in Sydney, meaning he very well could have crashed into a passenger jet.
That's just fantastic. I always love feeling the comfort.
I like to be a nice friend, and I'm an accidental terrorist.
Remember that dude in New York drove his plane into the tower, the former baseball player, and it's like, buddy, you don't want to do that.
It was right after 9/11, right?
It was really bad timing.
Yeah. 2 other times, he was cited for intentionally flying into a cloud, which, again, could have crashed him into another plane, because the type of single-engine planes he was allowed to fly, they didn't have onboard radar.
What is he, a Doberman? He's just like, there's a cloud, and then he just goes for it? What is happening? I'm curious. I understand the idea of like seeing a cloud and be like, I want to go through that cloud, but then like, I'm a child, and he's a pilot. So he really needs to like not do what he wants to do as a child.
I'll tell you what, the only difference between a child and a pilot is a hat and a plane. As long as you can get in there, you're a pilot. When you're in the chair, it's like, you're now a pilot official.
That's true.
Yeah. Not surprisingly, these offenses, particularly the cloud attacks, they were actually serious enough where Fred was considered for prosecution.
Cloud attacks. I gotta get this cloud.
What are you in for? I see those goddamn clouds up there. Yeah, I'm trying to fuck with them.
Yeah, guess what? Yeah, me too. Because them clouds are the ones making me gay.
Aw. Nice.
But every time, they let him off with a warning. And even with these black marks on his record, Fred was granted a private pilot's license in May of 1978, just 5 months before he disappeared. At the same time, Valentish was still trying to take another route to a pilot career. But when he tried being a commercial airline pilot, he failed all 5 of the subject exams. And not only that, he failed all 5 of them twice in the same month.
Hey man, I'm a professional improver. And I haven't failed any sort of class I've ever taken. I didn't take improv class, okay? So maybe this is all about how, it's about being DIY. It's about putting together a pilot's career for your fucking self. Fuck what all
50 miles from Victoria to King Island, but no one is really sure why he took his flight. He told some people he was going to go pick up some very brave friends, while others thought that he was going to go to King Island to buy crayfish. Later investigation, however, found that both of these statements were untrue, or rather, no evidence was found that either were true, which is an important distinction.
Yeah, I thought the crayfish were going to be his friends.
Well, I also did some heavy research into what the Australians call crayfish, because
Yeah.
here in America we call them crawdads, and they're tiny little sea bugs, right?
Not
You
a
eat them
fan.
by the whole.
That's okay.
I absolutely love
I
them.
know.
Guys, so
Despise them, they're disgusting.
I've never understood the fascination with them, but that's okay.
Never got it. They're
in
gross.
Australia, because there's also some sausages in there and corn cobs.
Well,
and
you are
potatoes
just
and
talking
stuff.
about something that's much
Very
different.
delicious.
Yeah.
Now, crayfish in Australia, them's lobsters, friend.
Well, those are lobsters.
Yeah, fuckers.
Oh, okay.
And so they fucking switched up on us again. What was he really looking for? But there is some evidence in here that I will talk about that I do find interesting. I think there's a bit of a human element, and there is some shit here that we'll unpack as we go.
Okay. Yeah. And you know, while his motivation for going to King Island, while it may seem trivial, it does play into later possible explanations for what happened. Concerning Fred's conveyance on the day of his disappearance, he was flying a 182L Cessna that he'd rented from the Southern Air Service. To give a size of scale, this
We've
Cessna
almost made it
was a
to
light
22 miles per
four-seat
gallon.
single-engine plane.
We're at
In other words, it was
21.9.
tiny. And from what I can tell from playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, these planes are somewhat easy to lose control of. Although I might just be really fucking bad at that game.
Yeah, I love that game too, and I tell you what, if the U.S. government had any tap into my data of what I was like when I played the Microsoft Flight Simulator, I would be put on a no-fly list.
All
because
right.
I always flew it into buildings, even as a little boy. I love blowing stuff up on the ground and attacking people, and never thought about flying safely, even once.
But that's a video game. You're allowed to be creative like that. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're grown. Doesn't mean you're going to be grown up to be a domestic terrorist or anything like that.
Nah, man, because I ain't no Bud Light. Yeah, I'm somebody else. But no, this is it's like the size of a Toyota, right? I don't know. If you're a pilot, let us know.
Sounds scary.
It's small. Now, other pilots who were at the airport just before Valentish took off, they said that he seemed a bit nervous, but they assumed that this was because most new pilots get nervous before a flight. However, according to Fred's father, Guido Valentish, Fred was becoming increasingly worried that UFOs might attack him while he was in the sky, which does lend credence towards the skeptical opinion that Fred just thought he saw a UFO and crashed the plane because he was distracted by a delusion.
I am beginning to think, though, that he had been seeing UFOs, and that he had because he did see this thing before, and he did weirdly become obsessed with it. But Guido also kind of fed this too, because Guido was super into it.
Police reported ahead.
His name's Guido, and so that also makes him kind of sus. And he's there, like he's in Australia, but they were both obsessed with this, and they kind of fed off of each other. And I think the reason why he was nervous is because it was a night flight, and he had some experience. Technically, he was approved for a night flight, but this was probably only his second or third night flight to go up. So he was very like it was he hadn't had a lot of practice.
He just got his instrument rating for night flights like a couple of weeks before. He had not done a lot.
So far we really haven't set up any sort of mysterious case. Now it just really just seems a bad pilot ended up in Ariel's garden. But I will say, you're gonna see it does get mysterious.
Yeah, it does.
A roast as dark as the night, perfect for fueling the cryptid research and mad ravings required for your podcasting. Don't mind the red eyes, he's just trying to warn you of the bridge. The bridge. Finally, from the caffeine-addled brains of Spring Hill Jack Coffee and Last Podcast on the Left, we bring you Mothman's Red Eye Blend. Yes, delicious Panama beans. Go to lastpodcastmerch.com to order yours today.
So Valentish's plan was supposed to stop in Cape Otway before continuing to King Island. And at 7 p.m., Fred contacted air traffic control in Melbourne and told them that he had Cape Otway in sight, flying at 4,500 feet. But just 6 minutes later, Valentish contacted air traffic control again and asked if there was any seemed to be followed.
And this is where it really gets mysterious. Now, the actual recording of this air traffic control call is out there on the internet, but it is very difficult audio to listen to, so we can't really feature it on the show. Like, we won't be able to hear it. I had to actually put my head up against the laptop, which I'm certain stuff in my brain, to really absorb what it was they were saying. But it does start to get really wiggity here, because he says, okay, there's something behind me, because there is military space here.
Police reported ahead.
And he asks to check, are there any military operations going on right now? Are there any military airplanes in sight? And they're like, no. And he's like, because I got this thing right behind me that's real big.
This is scary stuff. The air traffic controller responded that nothing could be seen on his radar, so he had Valentish describe what he was seeing. From what Fred said, the craft had 4 bright lights that looked like landing lights, and it was approaching from due east while seemingly playing a game, flying at over 2 to 3 times Fred's speed.
He straight up said, I think it's playing a game with me. Here's a little tiny reading of what he described as he was flying. It's flying past. It's a long shape. Open microphone for 3 seconds.
In 1 mile, use the right lane to take exit 201, US 89 North, Fort Page.
I cannot identify more than open microphone for 3 seconds. Before me right now, Melbourne. It's right before me. Melbourne, it seems like it's stationary. What it's doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is, it's just orbiting on top of me. Also, it's got a green light and sort of metallic. It's all shiny on the outside.
Whoa, that's freaking crazy, dude. Even if he was a good pilot, he'd be freaking the hell out. So, I mean, it makes sense that he's
We'll get
scared.
we'll get into the full skeptics explanation later, but there is speculation. There is speculation that he freaked out because he wasn't a good pilot.
Oh, definitely.
yeah,
And there's also speculation that he was flying upside down and was looking at his reflection in the ocean. That's actually it.
Exit right to exit 201, US 89 North, Fort Page.
But he also said his plane would not be able to last longer than 3 seconds. That type of stuff.
In 900 feet, use the left 2 lanes to turn left on Country Club Drive.
What would it sputter out? It would literally shut down.
Yeah, it's got a, what do they call it? A gravity fuel system. So if it went upside down, it would immediately, you're dead if you fly that plane upside down. But that's the thing, is that his description of the aircraft it's why ufology is so much fun these days. And it's one of the reasons why Fred's story can't be wholeheartedly dismissed as a simple fuck-up. Fred said that the aircraft was oblong, it had a green light, it was
Turn left on Country Club Drive.
metallic and shiny on the outside, and that sounds a hell of a lot like the craft that's been described by pilots for decades, and those pilots' claims were finally
In half a mile, use the right 2 lanes to turn right on US 89.
confirmed by hard video evidence of UFOs that have been released over the last few years. It all matches up. That's what makes disclosure so fucking insane, is that it all matches up with shit these people have been reporting for fucking decades, since the 50s.
I know what I saw! I know what I saw!
Just after Valentish described his UFO, it vanished, and to Fred's credit, he did not immediately start screaming that he'd just seen a UFO. Instead, he first assumed
In 1,000 feet, turn right.
that he'd seen a military craft, because he had asked, as soon as it disappeared, he asked, are there any military craft in this area? Is there any project planned in this area right now? And just when air traffic control told him that no such craft was present, nor were any exercises being done in the area, Valentish said over the radio that his UFO had just come back into sight and was approaching him from the southwest. At that same time,
In 900 feet, use the right 2 lanes to turn right on US 89.
Valentish also reported that his plane was quote-unquote rough idling, which means that it was sputtering out.
Yeah, that's on me at minute 5 of heaven set.
Turn right on US 89.
Can you look
Yeah, rough sputtering. Rough sputtering.
Rough idling.
Rough idle.
Rough
looking
idling.
for a shell?
The last report about the UFO that Valentish gave was that the craft was hovering above him.
Continue straight for 45 minutes to US 89 North.
His last words
I'm looking
just
for a
before the
shell
radio went
gas
silent
station.
were, "It is not an aircraft."
23, 24, and the thing is coughing. It's coughing. Roger. What are your intentions? My intentions are to go to King Island, Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. Open microphone for 2 seconds. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. Cuts out. And then this noise can be heard on the actual recording. You hear this noise, it sounds like...
It's a metallic screeching is how it's described, and it goes on for 17 seconds.
I'm gonna black out.
17 seconds is how long it goes on for, and then it just disconnects. Now, it was assumed immediately that Fred Valentine should simply become discombobulated during a night flight. He began flying upside down, which is apparently possible in single-engine planes flying at night, and he fell into a death spiral.
Because it's completely pitch black out there. It's completely pitch black out there. It's very, very easy to get disoriented in the 3D space of flying an airplane.
Yeah. 3 days later, however, once the transcript was released, Fred's father Guido made a public statement saying that he hoped his son was abducted by aliens because the alternative was dead, which ain't the worst assumption based on Fred's flight record.
And I got to tell you, I didn't make this puppet, and I have an angel turn him into a boy for him to get adopted by the aliens.
It's one of the stranger Australian accents, but it checks out.
My brother Geppetto, he makes a little boy who cannot lie, and that's why his nose is 7 feet long when they ask him, did Geppetto touch you on the downstairs? Pinocchio, did he touch you?
That's fine.
Deleted scene, perhaps. Although Pinocchio was abused, he was abused.
Why do you say Pinocchio was abused? Who was Pinocchio?
Boy Island.
You don't think the Boy Island is something different altogether? Yeah, he did get turned into a donkey, but is that abuse or is that just fun? Is that just good, clean fun?
You want to be a donkey?
I mean, I would like to be a donkey. I wouldn't mind being a donkey.
I think the role is already filled. Yeah, he was abused, man. He didn't ask to be, born or anything, and then he's made of wood.
Birth is abuse.
Yeah. And then it's like every time you lie, your nose gets longer. It's like, well, how is he going to survive in America?
I don't know.
Well, as it turned out, Fred hadn't just told his father about his UFO fascination. Apparently, Fred had also told his girlfriend that if a UFO did come to Earth, he'd go with it. But he added a romantic caveat that he wouldn't leave with her.
That's how you know he's truly a ufologist, because I have to have the same conversation with Natalie, because she said that once it came up, and I had to do the thing where I was like, yeah, if they come, I'm gonna go right in the spaceship, and then I was like, but I'd never leave without you, baby. Like, I had to make sure, I had to think about it, because you have to add that tag, always been like, but with you, baby, there's no way that you're
What
secondary.
if she doesn't want to go?
She's gonna have to.
She's going to have to.
Because half my butt belongs to her, and if the aliens want to probe me, they're gonna have to ask her permission.
All right.
Now, even so, this girlfriend didn't believe in the UFO story at all and became firmly convinced that Valentine probably turned back to land after his engine trouble began, because that's what he told her he'd do in a situation just like this. However, land searches turned up not a shred of evidence for this theory either, and multiple searches of the sea turned up not even an oil slick.
And you see this within that FOIA request. Like, if you look at these documents, like they did an incredibly thorough search for him, and they could not find any sort of, like, because that's what you kind of look for. The telltale signs are puddles of fucking fuel. Like, you're looking,
Right.
maybe the fuel can tell you where the thing is. It was all dissipated. They found nothing.
Yeah. However, 5 years later, an engine cowl flap was found off the coast of Flinders Island, which was indeed a part of a Cessna 182L with registration numbers that were within the boundaries of Fred's plane. And this, to skeptics, is definitive proof of the crash theory.
So now we're here. This is called what we call the full diaper part of this story, because we got the skeptics in there, and they're like, nobody likes me.
Kind of taking it out on people there.
I'm just sitting in my pee because
You're
everybody.
mocking the skeptical mind, perhaps.
If you use summons or fucking ashes, you're not a real fucking from software player.
Fender Island, of course, one of the louder islands, given the electric guitars.
The guitars.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, the
Right.
I wouldn't want to be neighbors to Fender Islands.
Oh, wow.
They're
Wow.
all
Right near
practicing their.
the Gibson Peninsula.
Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yes.
That's
Near the predicts Fred panicked